Season 3 is finally here, and that is mostly a W. Of course, new content is great, but as expected, there's a mixed bag of issues that came with this. Like right off the bat, I can't pick the BR in training. It's just not there. There's duplicates in multiple weapons as well, like 2 heat waves, 2 shocks, 2 stalkers. The weapons are different depending on the map. It's just kind of random. I'm crashing a lot too, consistently, depending on the map also. Like Cliffhanger, I'm lucky if I get a minute on Cliffhanger and I crash. I crash here on Chasm as well, but at least I can play it for a bit. I will probably crash recording this video. It's just, it's happening a lot. 343 is aware of this. I know that there's a frame rate issue on Xbox Series S and X. Also, it's like capped at 90. Apparently, they're aware of that too. There's an issue with draw distance. If a player is far enough away, they disappear in your vision. There's a fix for that, a temporary fix I've got on screen here, thanks to Clutch. So a lot of little issues as expected. The real key here is not whether or not there are issues. It's how quickly 343 address and fix them. So I don't know if they're watching this video, guys, but feel free to comment below any problem that you're having with the game currently. Maybe they'll see it. Maybe that'll increase the likelihood that it gets fixed. Just try not to be a dick about it, right? Let's give them a chance to fix it, right? Like if they do it in a timely fashion, cool. We don't have to complain. If they take too long, bring out the pitchforks. And I'm talking about new issues, by the way, not long-standing ones. I know there's probably plenty of other issues you guys are having. Let's not even go there, okay? That's not the topic today. We're talking about the Bandit today because 10 seconds with this gun, and I could already tell off the bat this is a game changer for competitive. We're going to break this gun down in detail, everything I've noticed, and how I think it's going to affect competitive play.
Oh, you're dead.
Okay, so now that we have the Bandit, we're not speculating anymore. Let's just kind of run through some surface level stuff on the gun. Like, it looks pretty cool. It's got like a army green kind of color by default. I like it. It also kind of doesn't look cool. It feels like it's missing something, and I'm sure some of you can guess what that is off the bat. We'll talk about it later. The reload, though, I kind of like the reload. Like, the way that he just kind of casually tosses out the cartridge to the side, like, that goes kind of hard. I think that's kind of badass. Personally, there's no advantage to YYing this. Remember, you can cancel this reload. The instant the cartridge slaps into the gun, you can YY it if you time it to get that early cutoff. There's no advantage to time to shoot for doing this, like there is in other Halos, but it's useful to know if you want to throw a nade or melee or use equipment or slide. The instant the animation ends, you can get that, you know, that action out slightly earlier. Also, don't forget, and this goes for all weapons, if you burn the whole magazine and then reload, you get a longer reload time, as opposed to having at least one bullet left in the chamber, and you reload, you get a slightly shorter reload. So always just try to remember to reload at 14 if you can, unless you need that final bullet. There's also an audio cue that sort of helps with that, but the sound of this gun in general, like if I could use one word to describe it, it's beefy, right? It's a beefy boy. Like, it packs a punch for its size. And note that once you get down to the end of the clip, you can hear it. There's like a high-pitched, like, ping kind of noise coupled with the shot that just gives you the impression that the magazine is being emptied, basically. It's weird because I like the sound when I'm using it. Like, it sounds powerful and satisfying. But if I'm a spectator and I'm listening to this, I don't know. It's like somebody's hammering. It's the rhythm and the sound combined. It's like grating, almost. And I've heard some people have, you know, kind of comments about this on Twitch. Let me know what you guys think. And then, of course, the rhythm combined as well, like the rate of fire. This is the max rate of fire. This is not like the leaks, right? Like, the leaks were definitely different. It was faster in the leaks. This is more akin to the H5 Magnum in terms of rate of fire, and I prefer this, personally. It was, before it was closer to like the Sidekick or the Commando, and it made it look like it killed way too fast. This slows down time to kill. And it puts it in a sweet spot between Commando, Sidekick, kind of. And I think whether or not you like the rate of fire depends on what role you want the weapon to occupy in the game. And we'll get to that later. But like the H5 Magnum, it's a 5-shot perfect kill. It's a 7-shot average or imperfect kill and a 3-shot beatdown. It's literally identical to the H5 Magnum. And I think if you're an H5 fan, that's a W. Speaking of W's, I think the bloom on this gun is just a lie. Like, I don't think there's any bloom. I'd need a dev confirmation, like, just to be sure, but it looks like the reticle resets before you fire another shot, even if you fire at the max rate of speed. So I think it's just like a visual detail, and different than the leaks again, but another good change, I would say, from the leaks. Now, it definitely has kick. It's got recoil. We'll talk about that You'll notice if you just spam it, I'm not touching the right stick at all, there's some immediate recoil, but it's kind of gradual, and then there's a huge kick towards like the last 6 bullets or so. Just something to keep in mind if you're going to burn the whole clip. You're going to want to find like a break period, a small break period in between, or else you might be looking at controlling quite a bit of kick. And I do find that, like, you notice the kick, it's not super significant in close range, like close to maybe mid-range. Once you get into long range and you're like aiming down sight, trying to pick off people cross map, that's when the kick really plays a factor. Like, it makes long range shots very, very challenging. Overall, I think I like the kick. Of course, we're still getting used to the weapon, but it definitely makes long-range fights feel more skillful, though also less worthwhile at the same time, especially considering you got no scope, and then there's no D-scope as well, which, you know, that's a whole other factor. Before we get to all that, though, the feel of the gun. Like, how does it feel? It feels damn good, in my opinion, to use. Like, I feel like Infinite's been sorely missing a 5-shot precision weapon like this. Oh, it's just so satisfying, dude. It's like, it's so precise, and it's got less aim assist than the BR, but a little bit more than the sidekick. And there's just this satisfaction behind nailing shots with it. You got to be so precise to nail shots. And because of that, it forces you to have this like tight right stick control. I find that the BR, the way that it works, kind of prioritizes left stick and strafe-based aim. The beauty of the DMR is it really frees you up for right stick-based flicks. Flicking is so important with this gun. Like, precise flicks. And it's just something about that is just... When a Halo 5 kid tells you there's no dopamine in Infinite, why is there no dopamine? There's no skill gap. This is it. This is what they were talking about. It's the combination of the difficulty, how unforgiving it is, the intensity by which it recruits like your fine motor skills, especially right stick flicking, landing shots, and the level of focus and pacing required that makes landing shots so satisfying, but it's so difficult that I guarantee pros are windmilling and missing with this thing. I guarantee it, which creates a level of outplay potential that straight up does not exist with the BR. For example, here's a clip from Bound's Twitter. Excuse the poor quality and missing audio here, but he's playing Pro 8s with Bandit starts. Man's no shields. He's got about 80% health, hits the curb slide the tower, and kills Druk, who's full shields. Now, regardless of starting weapon, that was a ridiculous ego chow. Like, this man has no business living, but he did. And did he catch Druk off guard mid-nade? Sure. But the main reason he survived was because the Bandit is so unforgiving. Like, Druk did shoot Bound here. He shot him twice, but he didn't hit the head. Landing headshots with this gun is difficult. If this was BR versus BR, it's much easier to get the killing blow with a headshot. There's no circumstance where Bound would have lived here. He 100% would have lost this fight, would have died. Now there's room for outplay potential. And just for good measure, too, here is Druk's reply to Bound. Bound is top mid, Druk is on the bottom of the map in Aquarius, and the same thing happens. He completely outplays. Honestly, this is kind of dirtier, I would say, this play right here. Man's got no cover, he's out in the open, he just strafes, hits the shots, and kills Bound from low ground. So this is it. This is the main reason why so many pros right now are favoring the Bandit over the BR, and why they're saying the Bandit should be the next starting weapon, because to a pro, skill expression is what matters most. In the end of the day, if they know they're the most skilled and they're winning because they're the best, then that's a W. That's good competitive Halo. Does that mean that making Bandit the starting weapon is the best decision for competitive Halo overall? I'd say no. Not necessarily. This is a tricky topic. First off, I think every pro would agree in that, well, the Bandit has potential. In its current state, it's not ready to be a starting weapon. Main reason being it doesn't have a scope. It needs to have a scope if it's going to be a starting weapon. Not only does the lack of a scope cap out its utility at range, but there's a clear layer of skill expression behind scope battles. That's also a unique aspect of Halo that's just gone without it. I think even from a spectator perspective, the lack of a scope on this gun is just not appealing. Like, the aim down, even if it had like an iron sight, aim down sight, it'd be more interesting to look at. But just watching people play with this, and the lack, it's just very one-dimensional, right? The lack of a scope, the lack of like anything really going on with the weapon and gunplay is just not interesting to look at. And let's say we add a scope and the weapon's looking great. It feels great. We got Bandit starts. Is competitive Halo thriving? Are we trending up overall? I'm not sure, right? Like, well, I might like this, and I'm sure a lot of pros would as well. If we look at those clips with Druk and Bound from like a, like a classic Halo kind of standpoint, let's say, This is like a solo ego challenge from poor positioning, and the player comes out and wins the fight. The thing about the BR in Halo is, while it's less skillful, it kind of forces a higher reliance on team strategy, team play, and setup-oriented gameplay. For example, if we take a map like Recharge that by design favors more setup-oriented gameplay, having a BR start versus Bandit starts on that map completely changes how the map plays. Like, even if you add a scope to the Bandit, the BR is clearly more effective, more powerful, easier to cross-map with at a long range, making the setup more powerful, having a player top gold, a player top A. Because the setup's more powerful, it's harder to break it as a team unless you're more strategic and careful about how you break that setup. If we have bandits instead, you'd still have a setup, you'd still have crossfire, but it would be a little bit more lenient. You could make more solo plays and kind of get away with more solo plays to break that setup, which would change the map. The setups would be broken more often, they'd be less powerful, and the way the map flows would change to more of a rotational style of game, which, from the perspective of pros and educated viewers, isn't a bad thing. I just wonder, if you're a new viewer, like, what's more interesting to watch? I think having setups on the map is like very easy and straightforward to understand, and like, just from a spectator perspective, the way it affects the pace of the game as well. Like, is that more entertaining? Is that, what does that do for viewership? On top of the fact that setups and power positions have for a long time been like a fundamental and unique component of map control in competitive Halo, right? So I'm just trying to tackle this from all angles, in that I worry, is there an approachability component that is compromised if we were to just straight up go Bandit starts and just axe the BR? Along with an identity component as well. Like, I think the BR is still a very iconic, very loved weapon. It is fun to use also. Like, I don't think pros, hate using it, think it's like a death sentence for the game. It's not ideal. They prefer the Bandit, but you know what I mean? Like, you'd still want to see a lot of the BR in gameplay and competitive if they made the switch. Makwin also brought up a good point here, in that in Halo Infinite competitive, the sandbox is currently very powerful as well. Every weapon is kind of designed to be viable, to the point where if you control them, you got a serious advantage in gameplay. The BR, because it's easier and more powerful in its current state, it's a better answer to alleviate the issues with the sandbox. The sandbox is more bearable when you've got a weapon like a BR to counteract it. If you got a Bandit that's harder to use than the BR, weaker, what are you going to do against the sandbox if the enemy team gets all the weapons and has map control? Like, you're screwed. So clearly this is very difficult. Having a Bandit as a starting weapon right now in the current state of the game with the power of the sandbox, it's just going to make things worse, right? It's only going to further pros' issues with the sandbox, and they're going to want more stuff removed, which could also hurt spectators' experience as well. Having a sandbox is, part of what makes Halo interesting, exciting to watch, I think, for the broad audience. There's just so many different dynamics to this. If it was up to me, I'm in favor of Bandit starts. I would add a scope to the weapon ASAP. I'm thinking like 1.5 times scope, so slightly farther than what we have with ADS right now. With a D scope, still the ability to kind of cross map, do some damage, but harder to use than the BR overall. You're going to get more outplays. You're still going to get team play, team strategy. Some maps would change a bit. I would put at least 2 BRs on every map. As far as the sandbox, like, I'd try to preserve as much of it as I can, but I know that it's such a tricky balancing act. The other thing I'm thinking, and I'm curious to know what you guys think of this, loadouts would not be possible. Like, being able to switch between a BR or a Bandit, the weapons are just too different right now. Like, the BR is too strong. You'd choose it every time. But what do we think of having some maps with BR starts and some maps with Bandit starts? Like, I think streets with Bandit starts would play much better. Smaller map. It's harder to melt people off spawn. It would change the way it plays, and maybe it would make it more favorable. You got to change the sandbox on that map a bit too. I think the issue is the Sentinel plus the shotgun plus the Stalker. The combination people are having trouble with. It's tricky once again, right? But then on Recharge, you keep BR starts, so you kind of preserve a little bit more of that kind of classic style, and you get a little bit of like every type of player enjoying the game. Like, if you want to be the best at the game, you have to master the kind of team strategy focus that comes with having a BR start, but the individual skill and outplay potential of the Bandit start at the same time. You got to learn it all. Like, what do we think of something like that? If somehow done right, which is probably far-fetched, I think it could be kind of cool, right? Like, from a diversity perspective for both the viewers and the players, having different starting weapons depending on the map or the game type, like, who knows? It could add like a layer of depth and intrigue and like counter picks to certain maps and certain teams that specialize in one thing more than another. I don't know. All I'm thinking is like, is there a way for everybody to be happy? Do we get like the best, most interesting, exciting Halo to watch and to play for everyone? You know, that's both approachable, that's both skillful, you know, which has always been an issue, I think, with Halo, is finding that perfect balancing act. But I'm going to leave the rest up to you guys. Good conversation starter, I think, with this whole topic, with this video. Let me know what you guys think of the Bandit, whether or not you like it. It's weird, though, I will say, the way that it is now in the sandbox. Like, do you feel like it's worthwhile to even pick up with BR starts right now? Like, the Bandit is fun, it's skillful, but the BR is better. So, do you feel incentivized to pick it up when you're playing matchmaking? What do you think of the balance of it currently? Would you change it? Would you make it a starting weapon, etc.? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this discussion, guys. I've got more coming up, of course, on Season 3. If you want to see that, make sure to sub. Make sure to check out my related videos. I'll see you soon. Good luck on the way.